Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas Kellner, co-chair of the State Board, and we'll call this meeting to order.
Jim Walsh.
Evelyn Aquila.
And Gregory Peterson.
I'll ask the staff to introduce themselves, please.
Todd, Valentine.
Kimberly Galvin.
Pat Campion.
Tom Conklin.
George Stanton.
Liz Hogan.
Bob Brehm.
And our guest.
Amy Allen, League of Women Voters.
Board election operations.
All right, so welcome to everyone. First order of business is to approve the minutes of June 13th. Is there a motion?
Second.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. We'll do the unit updates. We'll start with our executive directors, Bob Brehm and Todd Valentine.
First vote?
I went first last time.
I mean,
No, you go. No,
the
you
biggest
go.
issue that we're facing now is the one that's been playing out in the media, of course, was the negotiations between the two largest unions. And obviously that impacted all state agencies, but our agency was among the first wave to issue, we were required to issue layoff notices to a number of our targeted appointments. They were eventually rescinded, but those still remain on the block in the event that the union does not, ratify the proposed contract. And the second union, who we did not send notices out because we didn't get to that point. So that still hangs over our head. The lack of spending or approval for spending on the state level by the Division of Budget continues to be an issue. Our lease, while we fully negotiated it, and our host agent, the Office of General Services, supported our lease. They negotiated it. The Division of Budget is not approving any outside leases until they do a complete analysis of all the existing state space. Then pretty much primarily the Albany area, because that's where most agencies are focused.
Pardon me, Todd, but how many times have we moved in the last few years?
Well, just once in the last 10 years, so we haven't moved that often.
It seems that often to me. I remember going to so many different buildings.
This would be our
Four times.
fourth build. This would be our fourth building, our fourth location in the life of our agency. So that continues to be a problem to the extent that we've now had to. We're moving to extend our holdover lease, which is expiring at the end of the month. So these things just kind of hang over us. Our briefings from the Division of Budget onto next year's budget continue to be doom and gloom. We make the point every time we speak with them, and Bob is very eloquent about this, is that we are heading into an extremely long year that will start in January, really, with since the presidential primaries in April. We have no idea at this point if the primary will move from September to something else. And whether it moves or not, it doesn't matter. Our election year will continue right after the April primary. We're continuing with the rollout of the new machines. None of that has really lessened. It's not falling on deaf ears, but it's not. I suspect that they'll make the approvals when they need to make the approvals, and that seems to have been the pattern. When we're absolutely desperate to get something, now we'll give you the money. But it's just jumping through those hoops is it's kind of getting tiresome, because you constantly have to ask and not beg for money, but and next year it's just not going to be any easier. So, and of course we continue to try to get more and more things are heaped upon the agency. The latest ethics issue, while it's a minor modification to the campaign finance program, is still another obligation that the agency needs to undertake. We'll get there, but it's hard on the staff, and it's hard on you want to say morale, because they're a number of the employees know that they're working with a sword over their necks, and that's those are not happy people, and it's hard to make them happy
Of course.
because there's just nothing you can do. They're in a bad situation. So we're trying, but that's our big. I think that's the biggest challenge we're facing right now. Is just getting through that and still getting everything done.
It's really scary to lose your job.
Oh yeah.
I think the staff did a great job, because whether you were on the list or not on the list, or the start of the people who had to review and come up with the plan, it wasn't a happy period of time for anybody, and it was tense, but everybody still got their work done, and I think they did a great job, with all the turmoil. What are what are the rumors? What are they hearing online? What aren't they hearing? It was not a pleasant time for many people, and when we heard the news that there was a settlement for CSEA, it took very few seconds for it to go from the blog to everywhere. And on the weekend, when we heard the news that the PEF settled, it didn't take long for that to get out. And I think everybody at least at that point felt a little bit of relief. But it's not over. I know this week, the message is still the same. We've accomplished the budget issues of the year and the legislative issues of the year, and now they're focusing on the operational efficiencies and what are the risks that the agencies face from internal control or whatever the issues are that may impact our ability to get the work done. And from our perspective, they are the unknowns of what the political calendar will look like, and the work that a presidential election and a state election year, an even year, does to us. But, we have our other issues from a technology point of view that are still, out there. What changes do they make to campaign finance? We have a very old system. Our NVRA, our nice voter system is starting to age out, and George reminds us that, we had the money from the federal government to put it in place, but it's coming up to its useful life, and what is our plan to get beyond the useful life? So, will we be able to, is the useful life of our system going to at least get us to the point where the state might have some money again, and we have a plan to replace it? But all of those are items that we have to start preparing for and articulating, because now is the preparation work for next year's budget. So they're all on our list of things to come up with. And I don't think we have easy solutions, and I think everybody would just have to be more creative about how do we obtain efficiencies and still get the work done that we need to get done. But those are the big issues. The other, I think, are in our report, which are the other routine things that we work on.
Thank you. We'll turn to the legal report. Kimberly Galvin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Basically, we set out in our written report what's been keeping us busy. There's just three main issues that are worth mentioning in the open session. The Department of Justice, I'll smile at them, is keeping us very busy on three fronts. And there's a lot of new people with the Department of Justice that are not getting involved in New York, so it's not the same old faces. But we have the nice voter issue with New York City, which they're constantly monitoring and calling us on. We have the most recently called special election down in New York City, which they're often every day or every other day calling and monitoring us on. And then
Talking about the special election for Congress.
yeah.
Yes.
And then we also have, and they're still requiring some information that relates back to the 2010 elections, which we're trying to get a handle on. And most importantly, the MOVE Act litigation, in which we had the conference with Judge Sharp, where he clearly told us that if the legislature didn't act, he would act to move the primary. So they've been very busy because all of those various parts of the Department of Justice are pretty hands-on, and they're monitoring and require fairly quick turnaround. In addition, we've been dealing with the local boards of elections and the candidates and the public regarding the petition filings and the objections and ballot access issues. There's quite a few of those. And we've also worked with the operations unit to review the filings that we've had here and any lawsuits that may or may not go along with any of those things. That's really what's kept us busiest. And I'll go into some of those matters in more detail in executive session, but for purposes of the non-litigation strategies. There's also updates that we'll touch on the double vote, overvote issues. Those cases have,
Which are close to settlement, right?
which we'll talk about more in executive session.
Kim, there were two things that I think we should probably talk about that would be helpful, because a lot of the county commissioners monitor this, is that you talked about data with respect to military voting for the 2010 elections, and I think we're probably talking about the same thing, that there was a report that one of the advocacy groups for military voters had published that had cited data that showed that New York was really an outlier in terms of the number of military ballots that were returned to county boards of elections but not actually counted on election day. And that the numbers in that report, which I believe the Department of Justice cited when they were doing the informal conference with Judge Sharp, seem to be incredibly wrong.
They actually just mentioned in the conference with Judge Sharp that had come out, and they also said they weren't giving it much credence because from their review of it, the numbers seemed erroneous as well.
Right.
So they're not really paying that too much.
So I had sent around a memo asking for us to do research on that. Is that Tom Connolly who's doing that project, or
I can
were
provide
you
you
doing it?
with the kind of,
Do you know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
no, the MVP.
email that I sent
Yes.
asking, basically saying, hey, this report's got to be wrong, but if it's right, we should be finding out what's going on here.
right, I think that at first glance, when that first came in, we reviewed it, and then even looking at some of the numbers, namely the number of military voters that they had New York State as having was way off. And it also, if you look at the report, there are times when they'll talk about the overall move affected voters, not just the military, but the special federal, from a large number, and then they'll talk about, let's say, a return rate of just the military, and exclude the special federal voters, so that really skews, the return rates and percentages.
Well, I know everybody's busy, but is there going to be a response to that? Is somebody going to put a couple paragraphs in writing?
I could go back and give you the
To
actual.
basically, provide more accurate information that would refute that report?
Sure.
Well, we're still, one of the questions that Justice has through counsel with Kim, and Kim through the staff, is outstanding questions related to the last fall's statistics. And Kim has been working with others, including Tom, to get those answered.
Because
and Tom and Kim have been
What the
working to get
depart-
those answers.
right.
And once we get all of that, it will help us to provide a clearer picture to DOJ that is
Yeah.
based on real numbers, not.
They aren't focused on that report as much as they have a habit now of going to the counties directly. And the counties invariably are giving them different numbers than they give us. Invariably. Without excuse. They tell us they mailed them on time. They tell the Department of Justice, no, we didn't. They say there was 100. They tell the Department of Justice there was 128. And it's really become an issue with them. And I think the Department of Justice has come to the same conclusion as we are, that every time you ask them the question, they give you a different answer. So it's become a real problem.
And how you ask the question. If you ask
That's
a
what gives you
UOCAVA
different
voter, including military and special federal,
Right.
it's slightly different than if you ask it just slightly different.
Right.
They'll say, yeah, we send the emails out on the 13th of this month, and then you really look at the detailed information, you find out, well, those are applications you got after the first wave of information had to go out in the first place.
Yeah, it's a real
So
problem.
Justice hears a little bit, and they get a little bit excited, which they should. We all get a little bit excited. And then when we track down the fact, it's like, oh, well, that's not so bad after all. Because you got it late. I mean, you got it after the first shipment went out, and both the MOVE Act and the state law says, whatever you had on this day, you have to get out by the deadline. Anything you get after this date, you have to send it out as soon as practicable. And that's what they did.
So a perfect example is this special election in New York City. Department of Justice was told by New York City that, we're assuming Brooklyn, even though they said the Bronx,
Well,
but they're saying.
DOJ told you that New York City told them.
Right.
We don't know exactly what New York
Right, but they
City
give
told
names, they give times. I mean, they're pretty good with their details. They say the ballots were mailed last Monday.
In the Bronx, right?
Well, he's,
Right,
whatever.
I agree.
And now, we can't, New York, we're on top of it. We won't get the information from New York City, so,
Well, we have a survey out to New York City that we provided instruction as to how, in the reminder of the deadlines, how to use the tool for the electronic, reminder on the fax, samples of everything they should send out. Todd had a conversation with them one day when I wasn't around.
Yeah, they
We
did
had
a
it the next
follow-up,
day, a
yeah.
follow-up, and we've spent the last, I don't know, 10 days making sure that everything is in place to meet the deadline. And they've assured us up to yesterday, everything's in place to meet the
New
deadline.
York City.
New York City.
Every five boroughs.
no.
Well,
there's
no,
a
only the special election in the 9th Congressional
Oh,
District,
okay,
which is
okay,
Kings
sorry,
County
yes.
and Queens County, a portion.
Yes.
We spent last night making sure we had copies of everything. All of the ballots they had, depending on what borough of New York City for all the specials, sometime between last Friday and Sunday. So they had the paper ballots to be able to do the mail transmission, and the assurance, I believe, from Tom, is the electronic should happen today.
Should, lots of shoulds. So I tell
So far, New York City's in full compliance.
That's what I tell the Department of Justice. I say we have absolutely no reason to believe that there is not full compliance that's going to occur, and up to this date, everything seems to be going smoothly. That's not to say they're going to call, New York City's going to say, oh, there was a printing error and we didn't get it, or whatever, it's going to happen.
Well,
And Dawn and Pam have been very, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with them. They've been working hard to make sure that they're prepared to meet the deadline. In our conversations with them, we've worked with Seidel, we've worked with Bob Smith from N-Tier, we've worked with Steve Ferguson to make sure
Yeah.
all of the records for all the voters that require by fax or by email are up to date and have a process going forward for all new applications, and that we're testing out the new system when it gets launched today. For all those voters that they have the email address, as soon as the ballot is uploaded, the system will send them the email out so that the staff of the Board of Election won't have to send out separate emails to them. And we'll have a proof that the messages went out. We put a survey, we did in the communication that Todd and I sent out, there's a survey that they have to give us as to how they met the 45-day deadline, and then there's a post-election survey of what came back and was it counted or not, and what were the reasons if it wasn't. So they have, and that went to all the special election, not just the 9th Congressional, because we figured at least we wanted to be on top of all of them with regard to the state law, but we knew the justice was mostly concerned with the federal congressional district.
Until right now.
Well, they keep asking. No matter what we do, they ask.
Yeah, it's new people. That's good. But they're really on it.
Well, and it sounds like we're doing everything we can.
We're doing everything that we can.
All right, and I would appreciate it if we follow up on the data issue so that we're ready to respond to that report, which at least in national voting circles has gotten some circulation, and they keep citing it against New York, and we ought to correct the data errors that were generated in that report. All right, thanks.
May I,
Yeah.
in defense of the boards, I think, we've talked about this at the staff level too, that the numbers that they cite as being disproportionate between ballots that go out and return ballots is because the boards are reluctant to eliminate voters from that military file in light of the current environment. So there may be people who have some dated information there, but the boards, if they're erring at all, they're erring on the side of enfranchising those people, and it's possible this ballot might catch up with them at some point. So there needs to be a revisit of the list maintenance so that
Oh, yeah.
that information is as current as possible, and that will narrow the gap between what goes out and voted ballots that actually come back. That's why that gap is
The most
significant.
troubling statistic was the one that says that the rate of rejection of returned ballots was 6 times higher in New York than the national average. And that number just
The November
struck me as
general
wrong.
election survey, as we've learned no matter what survey we ask, if we ask 62 counties the same question, they interpret the question differently. What was returned is a big example. At the federal level, because a lot of the states complained about the dead wood of applicants, the federal government in the MOVE Act went back to the application is good for 1 year. New York, when the law had changed, went to the federal application is good for 2 federal general elections, a longer period of time.
Which is a long time.
Could be 5, depending on when you
Right.
applied. So when New York adopted its MOVE Act, it did not roll back to the federal standard. It said we would have a broader approach. So it's helpful now, and it is in the follow-up survey asked better, what came back undeliverable? Can we look at, are those new applications or old applications? Maybe we want to learn to go back to the federal point of view. But it gives us a bad number if you compare us to other states, because we have a lot more return. But for everyone that is returned undeliverable, there are other people in that extra 3-year category that are really being enfranchised. So we're not getting credit for having a broader approach. We're getting a negative connotation because some of the broader category of people are dead wood and come back undeliverable. So I think we have to look at improving our questions so that we can at least get credit. If we had only gone to 1 year, there would be 25% more people that would not get a chance to vote, as opposed to the
But you have less
12% that
undeliverable.
comes back undeliverable.
Because I think that the important data is not what comes back and is not counted, it's what comes back voted and is not counted.
Right.
Because, and I think that number would be.
But is it possible that our interpretation of that question was different from what other states had, and that's why our number was 6 times the national average?
Well,
Our
if
subsequent
if
question.
you want to use the example, I mean, the example that I would use, and it's not, the exact same situation, but for the 26th congressional, we followed the same protocol that we did with this congressional now, as far as these pre-election surveys, the post-election surveys, and taking a harder look at the data. And in all the 7 counties that were involved, the rates were far better than, let's say, our general 2010 rates. So there was an improvement. There was only one kind of outlier from a what was returned and not counted standpoint, one county, and when we followed up with them, let's say they had gotten back 33 ballots, 30 of them were undeliverable because they were in the process of changing over some systems, and as a matter of just, in the hopes, like Adam was saying, of enfranchising more people, they left those people on the list, so they sent out ballots to those. So 30 of the 33 that came back and weren't counted were just undeliverable.
And so that shouldn't have been in that number.
Correct.
Right.
But that means that there were 3 that came back and were not counted.
Right. And
What
we're
would
trying
be
to
the
get
reasons for that?
Well, we're trying to get more information on that, and even like with some of the questions that we've been asking that the DOJ has asked us to find out from certain counties. For example, we had one county that had to explain 3 ballots that came back late, and one of them was a special federal voter from who mailed their ballot in from the UK, mailed it October 22nd, almost a week and a half before the general election, didn't put enough postage on it. It got to their board in February of this year. So, I mean, it wasn't.
All right, but there's a good reason, it's
Right.
clear, inadequate postage.
Right.
Right.
And Todd and I at the January conference for the association, having suspected some of this from what we saw from the survey results of last year's general, we reiterated all the steps in the current statute that they should be taking when they get something back undeliverable to, the special federal has a specific procedure to follow, and the military has a different procedure to follow to actually do list maintenance and to send out the communications and to stop sending them ballots, which is what our statute says, so that only those people that you have a valid application should be receiving, whether electronically by fax or by mail, the ballot. And that way, 1, do your list maintenance, 2, we're doing better tracking, we're asking the questions better, And we are following up with them when we see an abnormality or something that we just don't understand, to get a better handle. And when Justice asks Kim asks us, and we, put the call out to the counties to get the information so that we at least have a better understanding. Go get the applications, go get us the envelopes. Why are they coming back late?
And I think it would be helpful if we could break down the statistics so we can do a 1 or 2 page response to that report. And I think from our own internal management, knowing how many ballots come back with inadequate postage and are late because of inadequate postage, well, that's at least a relevant piece of information to have so that the legislature can evaluate whether or not they should do some other procedure. So that, okay, well, thanks very much. So Anna, you're up next on election operations.
Thank you, Commissioners. We don't have much to add aside from what's in our written report. We did process 78 petitions for the position of judicial delegate or alternate delegate that needed to be filed here. A lot of those are filed at the county board, so we're in the process of collecting the filer information from each of the county boards so that we can prepare the official roll calls for any state committee meetings that have to happen and for the holding of the judicial conventions in September. So we're efforting that as we speak. We don't have any news to report on the certification effort other than what's in our monthly report. We are still waiting for hardware and software from Dominion. We're expecting that momentarily. So we don't have any news to report on that front either. We have been working with counsel's office. We've been working, with whoever asks us to on the various lawsuits, working with county boards, fielding a lot of questions from them. And now that they're going to be building their ballots, our team has been helping the county boards on that front as well. And I don't have anything to add. Joe?
And on the ballot
Sorry.
usability issue, I think the feedback we're getting is that the county boards really have taken this issue to heart and that they are much more aware this year than they were at this time last year of the need to pay attention to ballot usability and ballot design issues, and also Phoenix Graphics has taken a much higher role in terms of consulting with the counties on usability issues now as well, right?
Yes, Phoenix.
I think you're right, but I'll leave it to Joe. Joe's been handling that on the front end, so.
Yeah.
I think that's correct. What I was going to add to what Anna said was that since the last board meeting, we had our workshop here on June 20th. I believe Anna and I and Bob were there the whole time. Other people like Bob and Todd stopped in at different points during the day. We had a couple representatives from county boards of elections, as well as someone from the League of Women Voters there. I think in terms of what we got out of it, I think it's fair to say we had a pretty good grasp already on a lot of the principles that were articulated by the Usability Works traders, and it's something we'll continue to take a look at with the counties over the weeks and months ahead.
And as you design the primary ballots, you're actually working with them now, right? All right, well, that's good. Thank you. So public information, John Conklin.
Afternoon, Commissioners. I don't really have anything to add to our written report other than to just to encourage the counties to continue to file their quarterly reports. I don't know if you have anything, Tom.
The only thing I'll put information out there is that the affidavit ballot sample that we had provided, we are currently having that translated as well. So once we receive this
It's not
translation,
the sample, right? It's the official
Right.
form.
Yeah.
It's not optional.
we'll be getting those translations back probably within the week, and we'll provide those as well.
All right. What?
That was a good remark.
Well, it's just, I understand the frustration of some of the county boards, because they have a supply of the old forms, but the legislature changed the law, and this is now the new form that complies with the law, so that it has to, this is the form everybody has to use.
This goes on in business in every place all over the world. They change a form and you're stuck with the millions of other pieces of papers that you have left.
All right, well, thank you, John. We'll turn to campaign finance. Elizabeth Hogan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a reference a bit to the written report that I provided in your packet. As customary, I give you the numbers that we work with in campaign finance, and you can see for yourself that we have been busy in terms of opening and closing committees and telephone calls and all of the other various and sundry responsibilities that go with maintaining basically 11,571 registered committees. The other thing I wanted to point out was this past week was the 5-day letter for the non-filing of the July periodic was sent out. We had 1,606 individual non-filers, which resulted in staff having to coordinate with IT to send out 4,818 letters. Now it's delivered by a combination of certified mail and regular. 4,818.
Pieces of mail.
Pieces of mail, 1,606 non-filers. But because of the way the statute is written with multiple notifications, it results in a huge mailing. So that was a large effort. I also updated you that we...
It's not easy to automate that process.
No, it isn't.
So I think people should understand that it's a lot of worker time that goes
It is,
into doing
and we coordinate with IT. They print off, in terms of the certified mailings that have to go, they print off the certified mailers, and there's a lot of coordination of getting the 5-day letters ready to go and sent out, but...
How many phone calls does that generate?
It generates a lot. I don't have the stats for that yet, but I mean, we're still taking them. As a result of those letters, those went out Friday. I think we had almost 275 filings on Monday as a result of people getting those letters and then calling on Monday. So it does, the 5-day letter, it's statutorily mandated that we send it. It does result in a significant number of people who file, luckily, because if you start with 1,606, you don't want to take 1,606 to an order to show cause, obviously.
Right.
So we try to get as many people as we can.
Cut it down to a mere 1,000.
Yeah, well, we try. Usually around between 300 and 400 is good.
Yeah, we provide the counties with, the specific counties with the list of their filers.
And they help.
Say, could you please,
Right.
they'll know these people personally, and we try to, and they're very helpful in
Yeah,
that.
they are. They're very
to kind of
good.
shrink the ultimate list, so.
And also, we had 25 seminars this year. They were well attended, and we certainly feel that they were worth all of the work that the staff has to go through to get those things on. What's in your packet today is is a resolution as well as copy of text for the adoption of the amendment to Regulation 6214, which is the recalculated contribution limits that appear in that regulation. As soon as you take care of that order of business, Bob and Todd sign the certification, that'll go back to the Department of State and be published in the Register, and those limits will then be in place. We are awaiting still the governor's signature on that ethics bill, which, as Todd alluded to earlier in his update, will provide campaign finance and enforcement additional responsibilities. One of the things that it's probably going to do is there's probably going to have to be some interactions. Bill and I are going to have to sit down with George because there's definitely going to be some IT effects.
Liz, could you summarize for us the new functions?
In the bill?
That's right.
Well, the bill, first of all, it requires that by the beginning of the year, we write and actually get out a new regulation relative to independent expenditures. Currently, the making of independent expenditures, as we see it currently, and there's a type of committee that exists for the making of independent expenditures. Those kind of committees are subject to the same requirements that all other types of registered committees, be they single candidate committees, multi-candidate committees, PACs, or whatever. They're required to do the same things. They have to register and file and in the same way. The legislature has determined that for some reason they want us to write a regulation and submit it for adoption that addresses independent expenditure committees specifically in terms of the requirements for those committees. So, you know, we've started that. I mean, we've assigned it this morning, actually. I talked to two of the staff about getting information that allows us to start thinking about what we have to put into that. But it's very difficult because we're going to have a reg that only addresses those particular types of committees, and then all other committees are not going to be covered in the reg. So there's that.
And there are other unique dynamics.
And, right, there's a lot of that. In terms of the other responsibilities, there is a new provision in this ethics bill that provides for an increased penalty for non-filing of 3 or more periodic reports within an election cycle. There's some statutory language, that there will be some statutory language relative to factors to be considered by the courts in looking at lawsuits for non-filings. The over
contributions.
Increased penalty to $1,000 maximum from the $500 maximum that currently exists for non-filing. I think of
And over contributions, receipt of over contributions, penalty, and receipt for those receiving it. They have to refund it. There's a
Right,
double
and
penalty and then a potential fine of up to $10,000.
Right, so they have to give back the over contribution in
And the fine
addition
is
to the
on the
fine.
recipient, not the contributor?
Correct.
The fine is on the recipient. And
Well, it's a three-phase thing. They have to give the over-contribution back. They're subject to a penalty of twice the over-contribution, and then they can be subject to a fine of up to $10,000 in a special proceeding.
right.
So this is going to require an expansion of our over-contribution
Our review.
auditing review.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
plus,
I mean, we haven't had the,
we've never brought over-contributors on civil enforcement proceedings. We've been referring them to the district attorneys, right?
that's correct.
So this is going to require us to start bringing civil
I
proceedings.
mean, we have not, Bill and I haven't had the chance to really, I mean, obviously, this is
Without
not
any
signed
new
yet by the
staff,
governor.
right.
We haven't had the chance to really figure out the impact on work, but
Well,
I.
Yeah.
With the over-contributions, because this is an issue we've been talking about for the last few years, it's a major burden as it is, and this is, my reading of the law is that it substantially expands the board's responsibilities with respect to over-contributions, but without providing any staff to do it.
There is no money that I'm aware of
Well, there are
behind
some
any of
other
this.
statutory considerations on the literal language, because reading it, when it talks about candidates, you can read it one way to say that it only deals with a candidate or a candidates committee that takes over contributions to the exclusion of it applying to party or constituted committees or PACs. So depending on the literal reading, you can read it one way. If you read it.
Well, it's a
interpreting
penal
intent,
statute,
I'm just saying, so there are nuances to it that still have to be.
but I think
fleshed
we have a
out.
responsibility, Bill, as I keep saying, where we find drafting errors or omissions like that, we really need to write them down and send them off to the
Well,
legislature.
We had
We-
conversations
yeah, we
during
did.
that process at length.
Yes. They were not
I wouldn't say that
incorporated.
we weren't following along
successful.
lines. We did our best efforts, but
Well, we could still consider it for our next year's legislative.
Right.
I mean, I'd make the
I
assumption.
still think we should write them
It's gotta
down
be
and
Ballot,
send them
it's on
over.
there.
I think
Just all
to Liz's
include.
point, we're still analyzing.
We're still
it.
trying to figure it
Figure
out.
what-
And I don't know what the,
Didn't
you
have
know,
to do it.
certainly when the governor signs it, you know, we just don't know when that'll be. I know the effective date is immediately. So
How do you do that?
when he signs that is going to be
Whether it affects the primaries or not.
what elections will
Right.
affect. You know, we just don't know.
It still
It's
hasn't
all
been
up-
transmitted to him yet. As of
Still sitting in the
yesterday,
Senate.
it's
So I guess-
Sitting in the
Yeah.
Senate. So that, and then, you know, we have a little bit of activity relative to the lawsuits that we've previously discussed that we will certainly be happy to update you on in the executive session. But I think that's better. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, the staff's doing a great job, and the volume,
That's it.
we appreciate their efforts.
Well, and with the lawsuits, I'm just thinking of others who are watching. I'm not aware of anything that really needs to be discussed in executive session on the lawsuits, right? We have the appeal is going to be argued in the National Organization for Marriage case in front of the Second Circuit. And I think that's the only significant litigation going on now, right?
We have the NYCRR vote cope lawsuit as well.
But there are no real developments in that, right?
Procedural issues.
Right.
Moving along.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I don't want the people to think that there's some tactical litigation
No, not at all.
issued that
It's
we have
just
to
if there was
decide,
any-
because everything is, what?
I said, no, those are just my cases.
Well, I think that's true, Ken. That on the campaign finance enforcement stuff, I think the litigation's going along fine. Much rather be in the position of being the respondent on an appeal than the appellant. And so I think we're in pretty good shape, and that you're very much on top of the litigation, and that the courts have been generally supportive of the positions that your unit has taken on how the law should be interpreted and applied, so that we're doing pretty good so far.
So if there's nothing substantive, that is not a discussion for executive session
Okay.
then?
All right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we go to information technology.
Afternoon. Actually, this was our first July periodic filing going through with 2 less staff in IT and one less help desk person. We did survive. It was fun, interesting. I just want to point out that we print those certified mailers, and there's only one printer in the agency that prints those, so that sometime down the road could become an issue. They are very difficult to print. They're on shiny paper. We have problems with print running. It took all day to print these 1,600. So at some time that could become an issue. I believe there are options for automating some of this through some Pitney Bowes type equipment, which is obviously costly and which may be cost prohibitive, but there are some options along those lines that would make it a lot.
And if I could just add, I mean, we had issues in our own unit because we were printing the letters, and our copy machine was down. You know, it's a copy machine printer, and that was down, and, you know, the repairman was supposed to be there with a part and didn't come, and, you know, it's a nightmare with these older pieces of equipment, frankly.
And the volume.
Yeah, and coupled with the volume, obviously. Sorry, George.
No, that's okay.
You brought that up.
No, it's a
Good
message we have to
segue.
get out. And I don't think people realize just how close to the edge we are in keeping this system going, that it's being held together with chewing gum and Scotch tape, and
That's in more places than most
And you
people
know,
know.
absolutely.
and from the public's, you know, and to the credit of both of your units, you know, the public logs on to the internet and is able to access the information, but That's
Well, they've
not
been-
guaranteed if we're not able to fund the
They've
maintenance
been
of it.
witnessing problems on that front too, because we need to
problems.
update our Oracle equipment, and we asked the budget 6 months ago for, they drug their feet, and they finally did just okay us to buy it this week, so we can update our equipment, hopefully before the fall filings come in, I don't know.
And,
We have to see how long it takes to actually get the equipment, which shouldn't be long, but getting it configured and
Buying things are
porting
not-
data over is a whole other story.
Buying things are not easy, so if there's a Pitney Bowes solution, it ought to be an outsource of printing is our best shot if it's a backup plan. But buying a piece of equipment is not easy under the economic climate, unless it's absolutely necessary. And even then, as George said, it took 6 months to get approval on something, and we had to show them how often the system crashed.
And yet, we really should be doing a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, if we're outsourcing it, when we could make a capital expenditure and save money in the long run for the state,
Right now,
we
we
ought
want
to
to do it
present
in-house
that
and
to
the jury
the-
rig it, so.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Enforcement.
But the scary thing is that we have so many problems
We've
with the old
fortunately been able
equipment
to.
that at some point, it's possible that the whole system could go down and in a way that we couldn't recover from it. And we'll be criticized, even though we're warning that, we're working with a dilapidated jalopy here, and one would expect that
It's part of our internal
Problems will come
controls.
along.
I mean, I know George has it in his unit for his internal controls from a risk point of view, for date issues related to the equipment. It's certainly part of the internal controls
It's
for
only a
campaign
matter of time
finance.
for something.
We were
It
able,
reminds me of being back on the farm as a kid, tying things together with baling wire and chewing gum.
But on these days when we're doing these projects, it's, you just don't know what's gonna come up, and then you just deal with it the best you can when it happens. And we've been fortunate in that we've been able to get the thing accomplished, but it is not pretty on the days when these things are happening here. It really is not.
Well, fortunately, we get things accomplished because we got good people that, figure something out. and
But it's
get it
like
done.
driving a car with 200,000 miles on it, that you have to wonder how long you're going to be able to keep going. And
Yeah, Liz and I have had plenty of conversations about looking to perhaps even reconfigure our current staff to see if the current model's working, to see if there might be ways to have efficiencies. Because when we do all these projects, they become an all hands on deck, where the traditional folks that would do it, it's just beyond
Oh, it's
that
beyond
limited
them.
number. So
Oh,
now
yeah.
you get into those other dynamics, so we're considering those
Well,
types of
and
things.
so, I'm glad we're airing the problem anyway, and certainly I know it's something that Bob and Todd are addressing when they put the budget together.
It's in the side letter, they never let us put it in the budget, but from our point of view, it's the items when we meet with the team, Bob Eccles and Cheryl, working on the internal controls, and we talk to the units. These are issues that when we do next year's round of internal controls, and we just completed earlier this year our submission, but since then, we've had a number of issues that have happened. And if George's software that took us 6 months to buy and hardware doesn't solve some of it, we know it'll never solve all of it. It just is like, it's one solution with the finger in the dike before it breaks. And we continue to have to evaluate what's our risk level. And all we can do in this time is let the finance people know, the budget people know this is the situation we're in. And hopefully they'll give us the resources to get it done.
So we interrupted you, George.
Okay.
Is there anything
Well, the
else?
next thing, as long as we're talking about money, I might as well talk about the other project we're working on, that I've had staff working on for a few months now, is conversion to the state email system. And I know I've said this in the House, but I don't know that I've ever said it at a board meeting, that we're actually going from a system which really didn't cost us anything to a system there's going to be a monthly charge associated with. I can't remember if it's $2,000-3,000, but we will be billed by OFT for using the statewide email system. And a lot of it is based on storage, how much storage we use. And we do have a few people that never deleted emails, so it's,
And they require us to do that.
yeah, it was an executive order signed by Governor Patterson that we
Yeah.
Yeah.
go to the emails. So that's just another, I mean, that's, something like that's a little frustrating when you can't buy a piece of equipment you need, but you gotta pay another agency to use email that you were using for nothing. But that's just my personal frustration.
I don't blame you.
We are also working on getting started with the next step in the MOVE Act. We've put together process flows and distributed them. We're going to be having some JAD sessions the week, actually on August 9th, Seidel and HP and Nysboe is going to have a JAD session, and then the following day on the 10th, we're bringing in the county vendors and some county commissioners to continue that JAD session, and from there we'll design a plan and move forward. The other thing, we meet pretty much weekly, sometimes every 10 days with New York City via phone conference to talk about their file maintenance. We sent them files for the deceased and the felons. They have, a couple of counties have actually made good progress on it. I can't remember which ones now. Richmond and...
Maybe Brooklyn.
It was either Brooklyn or, no, it was Kings, Brooklyn, yeah. They've made good progress on it. The other ones really haven't done much to get started on them at all. We were told in the conference yesterday that it's because staff was helping out with petitions at the central office, and they've since returned to their respective boroughs and should be working on them within the next week. We also sent them a duplicate file. It was 50,000 or something like that, I guess. They are in the process of printing intent to cancel letters to send out to that group. They said they should go out August 2nd. They have 30 days to return them, and then they'll process those the same way they did when they did it in 2008. We've also, with HP's help, we've come up with a possible long-term solution where we will, instead of them having to log on to Nysboe and perform their maintenance, we will send the information to them. They'll modify their system so that they can see online what the other counties see online when they log in, and be able to do it through their own system, so it goes through their quality and their bipartisan process and gets processed back to us. We are just in the early stages of that. We have to talk about, the technical requirements and all of that kind of thing, and then I think we need some kind of a commitment from New York City that if we're going to spend money this is a major change to our system. If we're going to spend money to do it, then they're going to have to spend money on Bob Smith to do it. I think we need commitment that it's going to be used. And that's all I got.
All right, thanks very much. We don't have any old business on the agenda, so we'll move to new business. The first is the presentation of the report on documents for prima facie review. We have the written reports. I don't know that we need to go into any of the details. All right, so is there a motion to approve the report that the legal staff has prepared?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so it's adopted unanimously. And is there a separate report for rulings on objections, or we have no
We didn't have
objections?
objections.
No, it's all included in the same report.
Yeah.
The type of document,
We don't have a
there's
single-
There
some
were no
general.
objections, right?
Well,
Or there was,
There
all right,
were.
we dismissed an objection because
Yeah.
the objector was unqualified. All right, so the next item is the resolution to adopt the amendment to Part 6214 3.0 of the rules and regulations. That's been distributed. Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved. Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's approved. All right, then the next is the discussion on the letter from New York City requesting an opinion from the state board on the procedures for closing out campaign committees with outstanding debts. Liz and Bill, do you want to summarize the problem, or would you like me to go into?
You can go right ahead, Commissioner.
All right. So the issue here is that there are a number of committees. My guess is the number's in the dozens, rather than just to put it in
Easily.
perspective, but correct me if I'm wrong about the number, where the committees are required to continue filing twice yearly, even though those committees were for election campaigns that have long passed, but the committees cannot close out their accounts because they have outstanding debts that they are not allowed to write off, because writing off the debts would violate the over-contribution laws or rules. And so we have some committees either locally that are filing with the county boards, such as the example that New York City sent us, or committees that file with our board, where the campaigns are 10, even 20 years ago. And there is no clear mechanism as to how the committee can close that account, because they have no means of raising the funds to pay off the campaign debts. The creditors of the committee have no legal means of enforcing the debts because the statute of limitations has long expired. And yet, procedurally, the committees have to keep filing these reports every 6 months. So, my understanding is that at the state board, we've been dealing with this on a case-by-case basis, and that there are a couple, not very many, probably less than 5, but again, you can correct me, where we have allowed them to write off the debts and file a termination report so that they don't have to keep filing every 6 months. And New York City is asking us to provide formal guidelines for committees that file with them, and presumably it would be applicable statewide, as to how somebody can close out these committees. Now, some of the issues involved here, this has been an issue with the Federal Election Commission, and the Federal Election Commission has no procedures for closing out committees, and they have committees now that are 30 years old or more, where people are still filing because the FEC will not let them close out the committees by writing off contributions that would not comply with the statute. If we allow filers to write these off, we're creating a loophole where people can disguise contributions that are in excess of the limit by making loans. On the other hand, we have no enforcement mechanism either. So even if that is the case, that the creditors are not seeking repayment of long outstanding loans, we're not doing anything to enforce it.
I just add,
Yeah.
as a distinction on that issue.
Go ahead.
It's not an issue of a loan, because the statute already has language that addresses to the extent a loan is not repaid by election day,
It is
if the
a-
amount over the limit would be deemed a violation, et cetera. This would be in a case of an outstanding
These are all
commercial
debt,
debt that you
right.
owe to a vendor for
Right.
services or goods.
Well, so what are the
provided.
issues involved in not, so what is the reaction of the campaign finance unit in terms of writing up guidelines on how these committees can be terminated?
Well, quite frankly, again, and I hate to say this again, having said it earlier in my report, but since this letter came in, which was this month, this is the first it's really come to such a level of discussion. And I don't really feel that Bill and I have had the real opportunity to take the time to really sit down and assess the pros and cons of a policy to allow debt to be written off. Now, granted, this is not, it's an issue when committees face an overcontribution issue on the part of the creditor. That's not to say that in dealing with debt, small debt, which isn't, necessarily going to be an overcontribution, that they can't have the creditor write it off and have it become a contribution. And provided you're not in an overcontribution status, that's not going to be an issue. It's large contributions, or it's large debt for like professional services from accounting firms and public relations firms and lawyers. Those are the big debts that we're talking about. And so we haven't had the time to assess this request. And we certainly have not had the time, and I don't know how long it would take us, to be able to assess the number of instances or the committees that are pending here that would fall into different categories of a result. For example, if we were to follow up on committees where they're old, they have negative balances or outstanding debt, and they can't close, X percentage of those may be able to be resolved, not through the process that we're talking about here, but through the treasurer and the candidate taking the effort to address the small debt that exists in a way that's acceptable to everybody without ever getting to a forgiveness on the part of the board's issue and an administrative termination. It's the instances where the debt is very high that we're going to have the issues. But we have no idea what percentage of committees we have currently that might be in the situation of being more than 10 years old or 15 years old and only filing no activity reports twice a year just to keep themselves open because they can't close. I don't know what percentage of those really is an overcontribution issue or how much of it is just laziness because you're going to, the treasurer is going to have to go out and figure out how to resolve this thing. I don't know because we just have not done that. We just have not had the time to do that kind of
That's
a
not been
review.
a priority.
Right,
Well-
because it's
So
so,
if we
so those,
postpone this for 3 months, would that give you a reasonable amount of time?
I don't know.
I mean,
I'll
it's
be
laid
honest.
there for 10 years, what's 3 more months?
Well, it's not even 10 years. I mean, it might be, 10 years is an arbitrary
Number.
Yeah, but, you know,
number.
Well,
you have.
From the perspective
You
of-
have, you have handled some of these things in-house on a case-by-case basis.
Once or twice, I mean,
Okay.
very infrequently.
That has
And
happened.
we've never had, that I'm aware of, since I've been here, we've
And I-
never had a request from a county to address a committee that only is registered with them, that is not a state
Well,
board
then
committee.
why don't they deal with it on a case-by-case basis? And
They want to do it in a way that's consistent
with
Yeah.
what?
with
The rest of the
our
entire state of
policy.
New York? I
With
mean,
standards, I guess, they're looking for some
We
kind
could,
of
we could do
standards.
that, but I think that the city board wanted to do it in a way that was consistent with the state board's policy.
I don't think there'd be any criticism if they took a step in there, it's one that files only with them.
Of course.
Let them take what action they need, and certainly they would have the justification for it, and leave it as it is. And in the meantime, we can certainly look into it, when we get the chance to, with all the other things that we have on our plate here, especially, campaign finance. I don't see any urgency in this at all.
So what should we say, Liz? What would you be comfortable with if we said that we would look into this, but it will take time? Because it's not, we don't see it as an urgent issue before us right now, but we will.
Well, I'm not saying that this isn't an urgent issue relative to some people, but I'm saying that where this fits into the demands on our time and our staff at this point in time, we would have to fit it in, frankly.
Yes,
And I'm
I
not saying
understand
that
that.
it's not worth doing that. I think all of these projects that we would love to do are worth doing. It always comes down to what should we put our efforts into on any given day.
Right.
And we take our direction from you four commissioners. If this is a priority item that you want us to fit in, we will do it. But I don't know how long it would take to do it. We'd have to go
I
into
think Commissioner
IT.
Peterson's recommendation is fine with me, that maybe what we should do is draft a letter to the city that would give them some discretion in how they handle this, and give them,
There certainly wouldn't
You
be
know,
any
maybe-
criticism on our part of any action they take. You know, let them investigate it
And-
and take with the action that they feel is appropriate.
and maybe we could summarize what we've done in the
Right, I'd be
handful of
happy to do
cases
that.
where we've done that, so that we could just draft a letter.
And frankly, when the first call I received from the signatory on this letter, when I received this telephone call about this matter, I went through that entire analysis as I see it, from, how you would look at a matter where you've got an aging committee, and you've got the debt issues, and you've got debt broken down into categories which might be a over-contribution issue, and which might
And-
not.
and-
And I did go
And
through all
and
that.
Liz,
I
you
want
know,
you
it
to
was
know
my
that.
hope that you would just put that in writing,
I'll
and
be
we could
happy
turn
to.
that into a formal opinion.
But I want you to
if
know that
people
when
don't
they-
want to do the formal
I wouldn't
opinion,
put it formal.
I'm happy to,
I just want you to know that.
'Cause it may be-
I attempted to address this issue when it first came up on the phone.
for these professional debts, my own view is that they're not really debts, because often law firms or consulting firms will charge a stated figure and say, well, if you can pay it, this is what you pay, without the expectation of ever getting.
In the same vein, we have cases
That
that
it's
say
really
you
contingent.
can't give legal fees because it's an overcontribution, and we've ruled that way.
Pardon?
I mean, we've had cases
It
come
has to be a
before
fair
that-
market value.
That's right. I mean,
uh,
legal
but that's the
billing.
problem is that in these professional services cases, there's such a range in terms of what's fair market value, because, I'm sure those of us who are lawyers in our own practice will have, if something doesn't turn out where our clients can't pay us, we'll often take much less than the list price, and without real regret, because
But certainly
But
it's
I'm not-
creating a giant loophole.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yes,
Put
it
that
is.
as a formal
So
opinion.
everybody
well, with
sits around and
professional
lets it go at 10
services,
years,
maybe
you know?
not,
I
though.
don't think the commissioner was saying anything about a formal opinion.
No, that's what I'm
You know,
saying.
say the form-
To do a formal opinion
Opinion,
would
right.
be,
I think it's going to take a lot to sit down and go through all the nuances and all the
Right.
loopholes and
Right.
try to close them all, which is a tremendous effort.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's not worth it, but somewhere down the line, we certainly can promulgate
Right.
those rules and regulations. In the interim, however, the New York City Board is a very sophisticated group. They have great people down there. You know what? Let them investigate, do what they have to do, and that's it. Let the chips fall where they may down there. It's, I certainly wouldn't criticize them for whatever action they take.
Greg, in talking about this with Bob, and this is not particularly to this very instant, but I said to him, these issues must be in other states too. They can't all just be ours. And on many subjects, we talked about many subjects, and I said, I don't think it would hurt if Bob, somehow we could get together with Massachusetts, Connecticut, a couple of other states, and they meet and talk about some of these issues.
We're smarter than all the other states.
And
I know.
the Federal Election Commission still hasn't done it,
I know it
so
still does, but everybody has found solutions to
Sometimes that's a
certain
problem.
things. Why couldn't we benefit from that type of conversation?
I'm not aware of anybody
not this
anywhere in the
particular,
country
no.
that's dealt with
This
this
just
issue
triggered-
yet, but this is an open issue for a lot of
This issue just
campaign
triggered that
finance.
conversation. It wasn't
Right,
that
no,
this
you're
was
right.
the issue I expected to be
All
solved
right,
by.
go ahead.
But I think we should give Bob that permission to reach out to a couple of the other states and be able to meet at Todd, so the two of them could meet with some of these and say, how do you handle this or that or the other? And we might learn something from it. We're not autonomous here, we are the United States of America.
Well, just.
Commissioner Walsh wanted to
Yeah,
say.
Just quickly, I wanted to agree with what Commissioner Peterson has said here. In addition to the report we've already heard about the time constraints and the things that get piled on you daily, and looking forward to next year, which is going to be like a double whammy considering what the past workload has been, this does not rise to the occasion of being the top of the pile of high priorities for the moment. But I think Commissioner Peterson's recommendation is right on the money, and I think that's the way we should follow this at this time.
So would you like me to draft a letter for your review at the next board meeting? Is that what you wish?
Or just circulate it by email.
Okay.
So we don't even have to wait for that. Because I think we have a consensus.
You do.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate at least having the discussion on this. Does anybody want to go into executive session on the campaign finance preliminary determinations and the complaints not requiring preliminary determinations? All right, so I'll move that we approve the reports as prepared by the campaign finance unit. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so they're approved. And Kim, you wanted an executive session on litigation?
Yeah, there's just a couple things I need to talk about.
All right, then we should talk about our next meeting. In September?
Yes, at the end of August, I'm going to be away.
Yeah, well, because of we usually time it with regards to the independent filing period, not, we're expecting any, but yes. Beginning of September, sorry.
So you want to propose a date?
Beginning of it,
Yeah.
Well, Labor Day is the 5th of
I'm not
September.
around Labor Day.
And the primary is the 13th of September, so one of those, either of those 2 weeks would work, so it's up to.
I
I'm
don't know
here
the
every day.
timing.
That doesn't make any difference.
Well, September 8th is the Thursday after Labor Day?
Yeah.
8th is correct.
I,